Good morning, Julissa.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for your help and joining us. I want to talk about cost of living, but I want to ask about those housing questions first. That's your area of responsibility, of course. 7 times I asked Michael Gove how many people he thought would be affected by a policy which would allow those on housing benefit payments to help buy their homes, make monthly mortgage payments, which are currently not allowed to do. This is part of this announcement from the Prime Minister today, extending right to buy. 7 times the answer came there, none. Do you think this policy makes sense? Do you think this policy will affect a lot of people?
I think this is a back of an envelope strategy that the government has come up with to get themselves out of a hole. And I think the reason that Michael Gove couldn't answer that question is because I suspect he didn't know anything about this until late last night, and he's probably scrabbling around to try and work out how on earth it's going to work. That may be why he was only on audio. He may have been scribbling away trying to make the figures add up. There are real problems with this policy. The first is that the government has got to get lenders on board. If you remember, Julia, when they decided they were going to make it easier for people who lived in blocks of flats after the Grenfell tragedy to get mortgages, they said that you didn't need a fire safety certificate if you lived in a block that was less than 18 metres. And the mortgage lenders said, yes, you do. So it had precisely zero impact. And then there are all the problems that you described, like the fact that if you're on universal credit, you're not allowed to have more than 16,000 in savings. And the reality is most people don't have any at all. Mortgage lenders will be saying to people, well, where's your deposit? So if the practical barriers are still there by the time Michael Gove emerges in the House of Commons in a few hours' time, I think the reality is that this will help absolutely nobody at all.
That was my first thought. Again, not as a party political point, but just when a policy is announced, whether it costs money or doesn't cost money, and any policy actually will cost money because there's bureaucracy involved in it, I want to know who it's going to affect. Particularly also with the mortgage lenders, you can change any policies you want. At the end of the day, the mortgage lenders are private businesses. They will decide whether they want to give people a mortgage. And I'm not sure many of them are keen to give people on very low wages who can't afford their rent at the current time, when they won't even give mortgages to an awful lot of people right now who can easily pay their rent, but just haven't got to the ability to scrape together that deposit at the same time. And what about also this plan to extend the right to buy not just from council tenants, but to housing association tenants? There are more housing association tenants than social housing tenants in total now, 2.4 million compared to 1.6 in council homes, because so many of them have been sold off. Do you think that's going to be a popular policy? Is it one that we should be pursuing?
Well, on the government's own estimate, it'll help quite a small number of people. They ran a pilot on this in 2018 in the Midlands and estimated that it would probably help around 17,000 families a year to achieve home ownership for about 10 years. That is obviously very good news for those families. The problem is the same pilot also found that half of the homes that were sold weren't replaced, and those that were replaced were lower quality and more expensive. We've got 1 million people on the social housing waiting list at the moment. We're short of 1.5 million homes in this country. We've got a housing crisis. And the risk is that while potentially helping a very small number of families, the policy that the government is proposing will actually make things worse for most people.
The answer
what we really need...
I was going to say the answer to all of this is building more houses. We just need to build more. We've got a massive, massive increase in demand, not least to things like immigration policies, which your party has put forward in government and carried on under Tory governments. We've got old people living longer, more separated families, people living alone for longer. We just need more homes. All of these policies, they're all just tinkering around the edges. We just need to build more homes, don't we?
I think that's right, and I think Michael Gove privately would accept that, even if publicly he's been sent out to defend this today. One of the things that he has done, in fairness, that is very positive, is come forward with a pot of funding to enable brownfield sites to be developed. At the moment, we've got this crazy situation where developers are eyeing up greenbelt and greenfield sites because brownfield sites can't be brought back into use, the contaminated land and other issues. But the government needs to focus on measures like that to speed up getting that money out into communities and to councils so it can be spent, so that we can actually get that supply of homes coming forward. And you are right, in the end, there are other measures that the government can take, but all of it is just tinkering unless we increase the supply of affordable housing.
The housing issue is also, it does actually leach into the cost of living crisis we've got. We've seen the price of filling up a family car with diesel. It's already gone over £100. With petrol, it's now hitting £100 today. 2 pence rise yesterday. In just one day, today. The cost of living crisis is hitting everybody. Even if you don't own a car, you're going to be affected by the fuel prices being passed on by the people who supply and make every single thing that you buy, whether it's milk or whether it's a new dress for a Saturday night. What should the government be doing? Lots who were critical of Boris Johnson on Monday night and voted against him in the vote of confidence, saying tax cuts are the answer. Would you agree?
Well, we've got the highest level of taxes now for 70 years, and we're the only major economy that is putting up taxes on working people in the middle of an inflation crisis. So we've said for a long time, do not bring in the national insurance hike. And we've said to the government, we think they should spike that hike as part of an emergency budget to try and get money back into people's pockets. There are other things that the government could do as well. I mean, one of the really big problems that we've got is that the government did take some action to cut fuel duty, which we supported. But many of the retailers then decided not to pass that fuel duty cut onto their customers. The business secretary wrote to them and asked them to do it. As far as I know, they didn't even bother to reply. The government should be coming down like a ton of bricks on those retailers who are holding on to that money and not getting it to the customers where it was intended to go.
I mean, this is the thing. People are facing these great difficulties. It's a key issue for most people. I know when we get people messaging into the show, this is the number one issue. And it's not just people on the very, very lowest incomes. It's people across the board who are absolutely horrified by their daily costs going up. You mentioned a number of things, and a lot of people may be supporting a number of those, but the OECD report is predicting that the UK is going to have the worst growth among the G20 richest countries in the world, other than Russia, which is facing economic sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine. Why do you think we have got the worst growth?
Because we're one of the most regionally unequal countries in the world. And in that scenario, even the winners are losing. The reason that people in London particularly are affected by cripplingly high housing costs, which knocks their disposable income from the highest in the country to middle of the ranks, is because we are failing to invest in large parts of the country and the potential and the assets that we have. And so the economy is not able to fire on all cylinders. It's holding the whole country back. Yesterday, new figures were released by the ONS, which were shocking about the way in which the gap is growing between London and the southeast and all other regions post-pandemic. It's really short-sighted for the government to write off large swathes of the country by axing investment in things like rail and buses, when that is what businesses need to have in place in order to invest and get those good jobs back into the economy and get us growing again.
Can I also ask you about these Rwanda deportation flights, effectively? Channel migrants coming across this country, illegally entering the country, claiming asylum. As we know, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, wants them to be flown to Rwanda for not just reprocessing, but possibly resettlement as well, if they're judged to be legitimate. The first flight's due to leave next Tuesday, but we've seen a whole host of legal challenges, including a call for a judicial review of the policy, an injunction to halt that flight, and even a trade union representing Border Force staff has got involved, along with a load of human rights lawyers, organisations and charities for refugees, to try and stop this. Do you think that flight should be stopped?
I mean, I think the policy should be stopped. I don't think it should take a legal challenge for the government to work out that not only is this unethical, but it's unworkable and it's completely unaffordable. It's absurd at a time when people are struggling to keep their heads above water that the government is proposing to spend over £30,000 per person to send Ukrainian refugees, Afghan refugees over to Rwanda. They spent £120 million so far, and they haven't.
We spent 40 grand a year housing these people, for goodness sake. This will save us money in the long run. Not only will it be cheaper than the cost of actually looking after these people in this country right now, but if it does deter people, because they go, hold on a minute, if I arrive in the UK, I got picked up on my little dinghy, I'm going to be shipped off to Rwanda, I'm not going to end up in the UK anyway, then we'll be saving money.
Well, it didn't work in Israel. Israel tried exactly the same.
It worked
policy.
In Australia,
and all it did
worked
was
in Australia.
People smugglers. We should be taking action to disrupt those people smuggling rings. I mean, just to give you one example, Julia, it is absurd that it's still legal to advertise on social media. These people smugglers are able to advertise their routes and their services on social media. We've tried to get the government to clamp down on that. They refuse. We should be taking action.
I'm not sure how the government clamps down. They're getting this information in other countries. I'm not sure we're in charge of what advertising people, what people tweet in France or wherever. But the problem is that Labour Party might disagree with this particular policy, but what is your alternative?
Well, first thing you've got to do is have safe routes for people who have a legitimate claim for asylum to come here. We've just seen what has been happening, unfolding in front of our eyes in Ukraine, and the opening up of homes of people across this country. Huge generosity of spirit across
Those
Britain
aren't people coming to make their lives here. Those are people who need to have somewhere to live while the countries at war has been invaded by Russia. That's not the same as economic migrants and those coming from a whole host of countries across Africa and the Middle East who want to come and live here for good.
There are other routes for economic migrants. We have a responsibility towards people who are fleeing persecution in fear of their lives, who would otherwise face torture or perhaps death if they were returned to the countries that they came from.
Perfectly safe in France right now.
Since the Second World War, and for good reason.
They're in France. They're perfectly safe. Right, Lisa, we'll have to leave it there. Lisa Nandy, Shadow Housing Secretary at Labour MP, thank you very much for joining us. Very quick word from Ali Merj, just on that issue. I just don't think Labour's got a leg to stand on this one. They're not offering an alternative other than open the borders.
Well, Lisa Nandy's very fluent and very impressive, but has got no answers. Not only to that, but also on tax. I never thought I'd see the day when Labour is outflanking the Tories on the right on tax cuts. I mean, they were opposed to Rishi Sunak's increase in corporation tax from 19 to 25%. Yeah. They're against the NI increase of 1.2. Oh. Who's going to pay for the 6 million waiting list? That is a 12 billion cut to the NHS funding every year. Where's it going to come from, Julia?
This is the problem, isn't it? Everyone wants tax cuts, it would seem, but everyone also wants more spending. Do we need to be more honest?
You can't square the circle. Yes, we do need to be more honest.
But voters need to be more honest about it all as well. But we can't have everything.
Exactly.
The European countries that have massive better services than we have, they pay a heck of a lot more tax than us.
That's exactly the point. But at the moment, the Labour Party is calling for lower personal tax, lower business tax. Where's all this money going to come from to fund this?
Absolute pleasure having your company this morning. Thank you very much, Dee. We're going to talk about working from home. All part of the problem up next. This is Talk Breakfast.